Into the Dead, Our Darkest Days, besides being a needlessly long title, is a curious case of what happens when you mix this war of mine with zombies. But even as someone that loves both of those things, I must admit I was genuinely surprised by how much Our Darkest Days ended up gripping me. A lot of it comes down to the perfectly executed atmosphere of stress and hopelessness, where every single excursion outside your safe zone feels like you're a hair's width away from death as you sneak through hordes upon hordes of gurgling, twitching, and utterly disgusting zombies. Greetings and welcome, friends. I'm Ash, and I just want to say that all of this comes from around 8 hours with the demo. As such, the stuff you'll see may be slightly rougher than in the current early access version, though the actual gameplay is essentially the same. And speaking of gameplay, Our Darkest Days has it split into two distinct parts. Base management, where you take care of your survivors, build up your shelter and craft various items, and the expeditions into zombie-infested areas where you search for resources, additional survivors, or even a way to escape this whole nightmare. The base management is fairly similar to this war of mine. Each day is split into two phases, day and night, during which you'll be able to allocate your survivors to specific tasks. You can have someone spend the day cooking, another person planting crops in your rooftop garden, and a third one mass-producing weapons for future expeditions. On its own, the system is very simple and very easy to understand. All of the difficulty comes from the fact that you never have enough resources or time to get everything done. Planting crops is great, but those things take a while to grow and your people are starving right now, so can you really spare the veggies? Upgrading your workbench requires an absolute ton of metal, and while it would be handy, can you really say goodbye to 5 or 6 knives worth of metal in order to make it happen? And what about your best fighter? How often are you willing to risk their life and sanity for the benefit of the team? What happens if they crack? Or, Lord forbid, what happens if they die? Are you just done? Are you just dead? The obvious solution is to bring in more survivors to bolster your numbers. But more hands means more mouths to feed and more potential problems since each survivor comes with their own pros and cons. One survivor might be incredibly good at cooking but terrible at physical activities, while another might be feisty in a battle yet mentally unstable outside of it. There is a tricky balance to be struck here, and even though I think I know what I'm doing, it is still never comfortable. It always feels like the group is one bad looting run from total collapse, which really helps sell the idea that these are the end times. The whole thing is stressful, but I would say it's the good kind of stressful. The kind that keeps you sharp and immersed into the world. But the question is, how do you even get new stuff? Well, each safe house has a certain radius around it that you can pillage for resources. The bigger and more infested the location, the more items you'll likely get out of it, though obviously the bigger the risk. And if you ever exhaust all of the nearby locations, you'll have to pack up your bags and move the group somewhere else. That's probably a good thing to do regardless, as the longer you camp at any given place, the more harrowing the zombie presence becomes. Once you've selected a location, you'll be prompted to give an unlucky survivor of your choice an assortment of weapons and tools to brave the challenges that await them. The more you give them, the greater the chance of success they'll have. But if their hands are full of knives and frying pans, they won't exactly be able to bring much stuff back. Despite this, I still tend to over-prepare, as it is a lot easier to just send a worse survivor back later to pick up the random knickknacks than it is to have your star athlete free and in peak condition. From what I can tell, each of these locations, and there is a lot of them, is handcrafted, though the actual zombie spawn locations are semi-randomized. So while you can go through the same sort of buildings in 2 separate runs, chances are they'll still be able to surprise you. So in order to give yourself the best possible chance at success, you'll need to disassemble each location as stealthily and methodically as possible. While the zombies may be dumb, there is a lot of them out there, and I really do mean a lot of them, though perhaps not in the form you might expect. Funnily enough, Our Darkest Days plays like a 2.5D game, where you are mostly locked down to a single plane, and so any zombies in the foreground or the background will not see you or hear you until you make a mess and alert them. Once that happens, your best bet is to run, because while combat is possible, it is intentionally awkward in order to discourage you from trying to roleplay the Walking Dead crew and just headshotting everything. Even a single zombie is a threat, while anything past that is likely going to result in you taking some serious damage, especially if they start to surround you. Compound this with the fact that weapons have limited durability and will break easily if you're just using them to bludgeon skull after skull, and you've got yourself a pretty good incentive to stay quiet. That is, unless you have a working gun, in which case you absolutely can go on a rampage. All the way until your ammo runs out and you're now stuck in a hell of your own creation. So while you can fight, try to avoid it as much as you can, because Our Darkest Days is primarily about being sneaky and clever. Why waste a perfectly good baseball bat smashing through a massive group of zombies when you can instead use a pair of rusty scissors to dispatch a patrolling zombie from behind and ensure that you are never even discovered? And this right here is what managed to get me hooked onto Our Darkest Days. There is just something primal and terrifying about sneaking through a decrepit, creaking house like a little mouse, constantly on edge from the endless gurgling groans around you, yet never sure which one is actually active and which ones are just caught up in their own little world of misery. That is perhaps the most interesting thing about Our Darkest Days zombies. They're not undead as far as I can tell. They feel more like sick people whose bodies and brains have been hijacked and twisted against their will. So when they're not burning with murderous rage, many of them are just crying, shaking, or trying to stick to old habits, or worse yet, just kind of slumped over like a discarded toy. All of this gives them a very unique vibe and somehow makes them feel both pathetic and horrifying at the same time. Peeking through a door and seeing one of them twitching and contorting itself as he attempts to walk around the remnants of its former room is genuinely unsettling. Even more so when you realize you're going to have to open those doors and get in there if you want to have dinner tonight. Naturally, things don't remain that simple for very long. Once you're out of the suburbs, the locations you can visit start becoming more and more complex, not to mention massive. Ordinary homes get replaced with multi-story buildings with barricaded rooms, locked doors, caved-in walls and floors, as well as various traps that may or may not be obvious. So even though there are no special zombies that hurl acid or suplex trains for fun, the difficulty still kept increasing at a steady pace all throughout my campaigns. A good thing too, because I found the challenge of conquering these big buildings to be quite exhilarating. Incredibly stressful to be sure, but again, exhilarating. It is never as straightforward as clearing things room by room. You frequently have to make detours, utilize the environment to reach different floors, intentionally aggro zombies to corral them to less troublesome areas, and pretty much try every trick in the book in order to make sure you don't waste your entire armory on a single expedition. And it likely won't just be a single expedition, because some of these places are so big, you'll need a couple of days and a couple of people to properly strip them of any valuables. This is where I need to bring up the atmosphere once again, because that is what makes all of these large-scale missions so tense and memorable. Doubly so if you decide to tackle them at night in order to be efficient with your time. When you're sneaking through hell guided only by a tiny flashlight, the endless groaning and mumbling of the zombies mixing in with the sounds of distant footsteps somehow becomes even more unsettling. I can't even explain just how awful it is to be walking through an apartment while hearing activity all around you, yet being completely unaware of where it's actually coming from. At the same time, that's also what keeps me coming back to Our Darkest Days. Sometimes you just need that little bit of controlled awfulness in your life. Or that could just be me being a weirdo. Either way, I do kinda like it. Once you get tired of the apocalypse, or once the resources begin to dry up, you can also start thinking about going through with an escape plan. These are essentially quests you can discover piecemeal while exploring the levels. Maybe you'll hear about a helicopter pilot being stranded somewhere, or a group of smugglers getting people out of the city through the old sewer system. Whatever the case may be, following through with one of these plans will eventually see your group achieve something that is quite rare in zombie media: an actual happy ending. The ending was obviously unavailable in demo, so I can't comment on the details, but what I can say is that I do like it when survival games give you some kind of goal to work towards. A goal that is perhaps a little bit more complex than just don't get eaten. And finally, I just want to briefly touch upon the visuals. They're not particularly high fidelity, though funnily enough, that actually works in Our Darkest Days' favor, since the grungy, slightly muddy textures really help push the idea that civilization as we know it has collapsed. So while I would like to see the foliage spruced up a bit as it looks distractingly bare bones compared to everything else, overall I am perfectly pleased with the visuals. They might not be anything spectacular, but they are highly immersive, and for a zombie survival game, that's honestly all that really matters. And you know what the best thing is? Into the Dead, Our Darkest Days has only just launched into early access, so everything I've shown you is likely to get much better and more polished as time goes on. So if any of this looks like it's right up your alley, I would highly recommend keeping an eye on Our Darkest Days' progress, and more importantly, giving the free demo a try. It's quite the chunky one, so it should keep you entertained for quite a while. Thank you guys for listening, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, bet your favorite type of zombie, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you for sticking to the end, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye!